I always say that if you have ADHD, you should always be, particularly for students, you should always be assessed for learning disabilities. And if you have a learning disability, you should always be assessed for ADHD. It's that common for the two to be seen together.
So let me ask you this. Let's start with the obvious question. What is dyslexia?
It's a great question. So I'm going to read you verbatim the International Dyslexia Association's statement about what dyslexia is, and then I can sort of break it down for you.
Can you do it in an accent? Because when I hear you're going to read verbatim, I'm like, oh, wait, this is going to be boring. Do you do accents? I don't know.
I'm not very good at accents. I can try. Let's see. Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological at origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can then impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So that's the official definition. Unfortunately, I'm not a big accent person, so I couldn't really deliver it. I could have done it in I probably could have sang it. That might have been actually interesting. So what that means is, and I could tell you from my son's experience that, so at the basics of language are what we call phonemic awareness. So our ability to read starts with our ability to know the sound that goes with a certain letter. So what we call phonemic awareness. We see the letter D, our brain understands that that means D. When we see the letter B, it's B. And people who are not dyslexic, this process just becomes automatic, what we call an automaticity of this process. For dyslexics, that's not the case. And so even if they see the T and they're told T, they might read it as that, but then the next word, it's almost like their brain hasn't grasped onto that. So not only now do we need to know the different sounds with letters, but then when we put them together, we have to have a certain level of working memory. This is where ADD can overlap with this, that has to remember. So if I present you with the word cat, your brain in a split second, if you're not dyslexic, is going k-a-t, cat. For someone with dyslexia, it could be it could be any of those sounds. It's and then by the time you get to the T, it's like, well, what were those first two letters? And how does that word go together? And then sometimes by the time you get to the T, you might say tack, because you're going with the sound that's in front of you and almost kind of, reversing the letters in a way. So it can be really, really difficult. And then there are lots of words that are not sort of phonetic. So you have the word the is not the, it's the, or of, O-F. It's not O-V, it's O-F, which if we said it phonetically would be off, but it's not off. So there are a bunch of words that we have to just learn. And that's when I sort of recognized, I knew that, my son's my oldest. I knew that he was ADHD. I mean, that wasn't a question, knowing the genetics of that and for myself and in my family. What was interesting was the dyslexia, because I have a daughter as well, and she didn't speak until she was 2.5. And that's a common feature for a lot of dyslexics, is that they're late talkers. So I was prepared that she was going to have dyslexia. My son, early talker, amazing vocabulary and verbal comprehension. But here he was in kindergarten right before first grade, and he couldn't say the word the. And I would say, okay, it's the cat, went to, and there was the word the again. And it was like it was a totally different word. And
he was every time you see this word that just requires that phonetic awareness, it was like he had to figure it out every single time.
It was a whole different word.